and we've got some great content to cover for today. So if you haven't met me before, hi, I'm John Barker. I'm one of the facilitators at CoLab. So I've been with CoLab for a number of years now. I run our product fundamentals course out here in New Zealand. But I've also been in the product management game for, I feel like maybe a little bit too long sometimes. So I've spent quite a few years at Xero, and now I'm at EasyVet, which is the wider IDEX company where we do veterinary software. So it's been interesting to go through those different industries. However, today we have a very special guest. We like to do this in CoLab where we look to include our members, and we have Andrei, who is joining us today to talk about product management in government. Now, that's something that we don't really talk a lot about. I think, government tends to have a bit of a broad brush approach to a lot of things. So we'd love to dive into that with Andrei today, ask him a few questions and, expose his bit of ways of working. So I'd like to hand it off to Andrei to give us a bit of an introduction to yourself. The floor is yours.
Right. Okay. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me, guys. So like you said, my name is Andrei. I am assistant product owner for the AT mobile app and the atgovt.nz website. If you ever use public transport in Auckland, you would have come across at least one of them. There is a very good chance you would have used the app for disruption information, or if you have some roadworks in your area, there's a very good chance you would have used website, also for a lot of other things anyway. Really, really excited and a little bit nervous to be here. I've done the product fundamentals course with CoLab. This is how we got to know each other. This is how I met John, because he was my facilitator. And now here I am. And I don't know, John, did you want me to jump into a little bit of like my bio? Or
yeah, let's get into a bit of an intro. So, Andrei, how did you wind up at Auckland Transport? Give us a bit of a view of your background, maybe some of your studies that kind of led you up to where you are now.
Yes, so I'll start a little bit far off, not quite with Adam's apple, but with a little bit further back. So I'm originally from Russia. I graduated as a teacher of English and Spanish, teacher and interpreter of English and Spanish way back. It was sometime in the last century. Well, I actually graduated in this century, but
I'm not gonna ask your age, Andrei, or date yourself. Yeah, it's fine, because you'll ask me and then I have to date myself.
Yeah, that's right. So I've done back home, I've done different things. I've done a couple of corporate jobs. I've owned an English school. I worked as a self-employed person for a very long time. But then at some point around 2014-15, I felt like I needed a big change. So I kind of spun the globe, poked my finger on New Zealand. Hey, let's go to New Zealand. So here I am now, which is 10 years on. I've gone through a bunch of, when I arrived here, I came here to study. So I did a business qualification, and then a bunch of casual jobs, and then through building the relationships, so we're starting to get into interesting stuff. Through building relationships, I got a job at Auckland Uni, where I built my way up the career ladder, if you like, where I landed a role called System and Process Improvement Lead at admissions at the University of Auckland. And that was what I now understand a product role, even though it wasn't called a product role, but at least 50% of the role was actually software delivery. A lot of it was not customer facing, but it was still software for internal use. And some of it was actually customer facing anyway. And the thrill of that job was, at that time, Auckland Uni was going agile and was just being introduced to Scrum teams and the whole Scrum framework. And I landed in that very sweet spot where we ended up having a very capable product owner and Scrum team who were really good developers. They just adopted the agile working style, and we just got a lot of stuff done at that time. So for about 2 years, until the rest of the org realized that we have this really beautiful resource, we were able to get stuff done. And hey, that felt really good. So before I landed that role, I was in the admissions advisor role for about a year and a half. So I knew the customer pain points because, hey, when you're an advisor, you talk to customers a lot. So I knew what the pains were. I knew what the internal team pains were. All the process bottlenecks I knew really well. And when I got my hands on, hey, let's go and fix it. Let's make people's lives better. Let's make applicants' lives better. That was like 2 years of pure joy and adrenaline. After about 2 years, the org started realizing that, well, there is actually that nice resource that they can rely on. And this is where I learned the word prioritization, which is a code word for no, you can't have all the resource you want. So then gradually, we started running into the problems that a lot of orgs run into, whereas we have only so much IT resource and so much development resource, but there's a lot more things that we want to get done. Long story short, it got to the point where I feel like I've exhausted the capacity of that role. And then I did a very short stint into the commercial world at a small crane hire company, which was actually a really good experience because I had to do payroll and be a team leader and do a lot of other things, including cleaning. And that bit was felt a little bit too much. Plus, when the AT role, product role, like true product role, with the product title next to it came up, I just immediately jumped on it because, look, that thrill of getting stuff out there that makes things better, changes lives, I did not forget that. So here I am now, where I am.
That's amazing. I think, the fact that you've mentioned that pure joy and exhilaration to make things better for people. I think that's a very common thing that, product people find is to get in and actually make it better for a whole bunch of people. So I suppose my next question for you would be like, what does that pure joy and exhilaration look like on a day or week for you at Auckland Transport? What does your day or week look like?
So yeah, thanks for that question. Now, because my previous role at the Auckland unit that I described in such detail was a product role, but it wasn't actually a product role formally, right? I did not know about a lot of parts that come with product. So there is a price to pay for exhilaration and excitement, such as going through a lot of detail, a lot of niggly detail. So my current role has probably three components to it. There's a bit of admin, as I think, to be honest, all of us do. There's a bit of specialist stuff, and there is the actual product stuff, right? So the admin would be something along the lines of set up a meeting, reach out to this person, send a document there, collect the feedback from there, yada yada, right? Admin stuff, set up a meeting, yeah. Agenda, minutes, which is actually in the government org with lots of meetings, I could not overemphasize the importance of keeping some sort of actionable minutes, because we don't necessarily have AI tools that will summarize our meetings, and I don't think a lot of people have that yet. So yeah, that becomes really important. Now the specialist bit is dealing with some of the customer queries that get escalated to us, and potentially raising requests for for some incidents that happened with our tech. And lost my thought. The specialist stuff. Okay, I'll get onto the product stuff then. Oh yeah, the specialist stuff, like doing some reporting into some of the dashboards that we have. And then the actual true product stuff is things like customer testing. So I sometimes have to organize and sometimes actually drive the whole thing. Or sometimes the designers will do that, but I'll support that. There is accessibility reviews, copy reviews, content reviews, going back and forth with dev. So there's that bit of product stuff. So yeah, that medley is kind of like what my day looks like.
You've mentioned some of that, those words around like incidents and escalations. So I think all of us kind of feel that as product managers. Sometimes, more often than not, sometimes we go through some of these, ebbs and flows with incidents and escalations that come through. And you've also kind of mentioned some of those challenges of maybe not being able to use things like our summary tools and some other tools. What are some of those other challenges that you've experienced working in a government team?
Uh, the couple of challenges are, well, first of all, when I first joined Open Transport, it felt very deceptively simple and straightforward. That could partly be because of the open floor space that we have. We have really nice building with some of the harder harbor views, which used to be an ex-Vodafone building back in the day. So maybe because of that, it felt like everyone is accessible. You could see CEO walking around the floor. So that felt really, simple and easy. But as you go more and more into detail, just understanding how the work moves around the org, it does take time. It does take quite a bit of time. And being efficient while moving that work around is quite critical and not always easy. Another thing that I found that I personally had to deal with, because we are public org, we sometimes get a thing called leguima. And shoot me if I remember the exact how to transcribe that, but it's Government Official Information and Meetings Act, Local Government Official Information Meetings Act, and that's essentially official information requests. So sometimes we get those, and those of you who dealt with it potentially, it's kind of like when you start digging around, trying to do some archaeology around the org, pull out some information, put it all together in a digestible format, and try to keep the customer, try to answer their query, but also make sure that they're actually happy with your answer while you're doing that, so you don't get further escalation, I suppose. That's another challenge. And I had something else on my list, sorry, but I forgot.
No, that's all good. Look, I think for a lot of us that have experienced things like GDPR requests and other things that kind of fall outside the normal company policy,
sorry, John, I remember.
Go ahead, jump in.
Which is the elephant in the room. So I thought I'd bring it up because I think it's actually quite an important one. Because of who we are and what we do, we're actually in the public spotlight a lot. And we do get, I'll talk to that a bit later, but we do get quite a bit of customer feedback, and the challenge is not to take it personally. Because of that spotlight, because the public comments are not always very favorable. So kind of have to be careful and take it carefully. That said, we do, and that might sound as a surprise, we do actually get quite a lot of positive feedback as well. And sometimes when I kind of had enough of this reading through heavy stuff, okay, I'll switch to the positive bit for a bit, just to cheer myself up a little bit.
Oh, look, that's definitely a challenge for product people, right? Some of that feedback. And it's probably that common thing that you would find in the public and the private sector is being able to take the rough with the smooth as well. So look, I'm very glad to hear that you do get positive feedback in government.
No, that was my personal surprise, actually, with the positive feedback. That was my personal surprise. Because hey, let's be honest, we do cop a bit of flack in the press, though it's gotten better recently, but we do get a bit of that. So my surprise was actually the amount of positive feedback is probably more than I would have expected.
Wow. So going on that kind of that vein of things that have surprised you of like working in government, does anything else come to mind? Like obviously we have certain expectations when we go into a new role, and you haven't had obviously that extensive government experience before moving into AT. But was there anything else that stood out to you as like you're super surprised, like you had a certain expectation, but it actually turned out to be something else?
I had a really good induction, and AT has a really good process for staff inductions. So the way it works is you get a buddy assigned to you for the first couple of days. They just literally hold your hand, take you around the building, show you where everything is, take you outside, show you where the nearest lunch places are, and that kind of thing. And frankly, that was the best induction I ever had in my life. And that was a real surprise, because I thought, well, my expectation when I was going in that I wasn't going to get any of it, but that was beautiful. I was really appreciative, and I'm still friends with the person who did it for me. And then I ended up doing it for someone else just because I was so grateful.
I feel like if your HR PX department are hearing this right now, they're probably giving themselves high fives for that induction process. But yeah, no, that's great.
Honestly, give credit where it's due, because it was really well organized. Honestly, my email, as soon as it started working, I already had all the essential bookings, all the essential meetings booked, and just all the process questions, all the navigating, all the access stuff and everything. They just flew by. That was real easy and pleasant.
Yeah. I think they're still giving themselves high fives from that. They're probably giving them double high fives now. So, kind of talking about some of that, that you've mentioned things like customer feedback, and obviously being in the public eye a little bit more than maybe some other organizations. How do you, what actually prompts, yourself and Auckland Transports to actually take on, new products and new features? Where do a lot of those good ideas come from?
Really good question, and there might be some surprises in my answer there as well, because it's probably not what I would have expected when I came in. But the reality is, we are actually surprisingly product space, like in the good format, in the good shape. So what I'm trying to say is, it is a massive achievement of ours. So I support two POs, right? That's my role. And our POs, just for clarification, our POs are pretty senior, so they're probably more like potentially product managers, I'd say. So I'm supporting them, and then they obviously have their manager. And the effort of these people is, I don't know how exactly they managed to do that, but we're actually product space. So what I'm trying to say is, we get our features prioritized and identified just like any other product org would. We are washed with customer feedback, because we have a lot of qualitative feedback coming from customers, because we got some regular surveys that we initiate, quarterly satisfaction surveys, some surveys from the website, and there's loads and loads and loads of feedback. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of entries, like easily 4,000 or 5,000 entries from one survey type of thing. We have a really good relationship with our contact center, so we do a bit of analysis of that plus CRM. There's a little bit of feedback coming our way from across the org, because we're such a big org. People notice stuff, so they feed it to us. Our own observations, even though one of the mottos in our team is "You're not the customer," and I'm sure a lot of you will know what that means. It's kind of like, you can't really think that you know everything for the customer, right? But when we go out there and we experience a disruption on the network, and we see what people are going through and how they behave on their phones and what they're trying to do, that also informs us a little bit. Sometimes for a big project, we may liaise with our marketing and source some research from them, or we may at times initiate our own research as well if we need it. So there's a lot of these channels that are feeding into our thinking, and this is where our POs, PMs, whatever you can call them, whatever you like, they're actually quite good in navigating that space and pulling out, those nuggets of value.
Is there a particular, item or thing that you might, or does the organization use to kind of like sort their priority on? Because you've obviously mentioned a lot of kind of sources of feedback coming in. And I think for a lot of people on the webinar as well, you probably find that as you're getting a lot of channels. There's customer feedback. You've mentioned the contact center. There's surveys going out, and it sounds like it's a healthy amount of people that are actually providing feedback. Is there like a particular kind of set of priorities that Auckland Transport specifically kind of uses to prioritize?
So that is an interesting question, and I think that might be different from a lot of commercial orgs. One of the things that may happen to us is our priorities, as in more on the outcome side of things, to translate it into product language. On the outcome side of things, are not necessarily defined in our team, right? Because our product is not the core business that AT provides, right? So our priorities may be defined in collaboration with the council, and sometimes the central government as well. And that does result in potentially rather complex documents. So we have this document called the central document, which is called Statement of Intent. And that's essentially, I don't know if I'll get slapped for the comparison, but that's essentially a business plan for the year type of thing. It's not structured as a business plan, and it can be a little bit hard to read, though in the recent years it's got a lot easier to read and a lot easier to digest, but it's still quite a complex document that kind of accommodates all this stakeholders' interests that we answer to, right, as an organization, right? And then the big job of our management and our POs is actually translate that and navigate that into actionable stuff. Did I kind of answer your question?
No, that was great. Look, I think there's those parallels, right, from, again, the private and the public of being able to have a roadmap, have a plan, to be able to align that. So it looks like it's, you know, it's not so much different in the government organization to have those plans. There's probably just a lot more kind of, you know, checks and balances in place for you as a government department to actually go through. So I suppose
we do say things like roadmap. Yeah, absolutely. We use that word quite a lot. We do use the word OKR. So what happens with the statement of intent? Our management spends a lot of time translating that into OKRs, and then our POs. Again, that's a bit of a rough simplification, but then our POs spend time translating those OKRs into roadmaps.
No, you also did mention, you know, sending out surveys, and I think I've actually been on the receiving end of some of the surveys that you have sent out as well. There's definitely a lot of, you know, questions that go into that for customers. Is there anything interesting that you find that really works well for you when you send out surveys to customers?
The one survey that I've spent quite a lot of time working on is the AT Mobile one, and I think you might have been on the receiving end of that one, because we just put a banner in the app every quarter, and we're still getting really good response rate, which sometimes surprises even me. But yeah, so what I find, did you ask what I find helpful in there?
Yeah, are there any kind of, like, you know, tips and things that you find, oh, when I ask this particular type of question, I actually get quite a lot of engagement from people?
We do spend quite a bit of time in trying to refine those questions, and one of the approaches that we use is it's sort of like, depending on what's happening in the app space, whether we had some technical issues happening in the background or something, we try and use the survey, potentially try and pinpoint like what are the customers experiencing at the moment. So it helps us narrow down where those issues may be happening, right? On the more positive side of things, like most of the times we don't actually have big issues. It works really well. Like I said, on the more positive side, sometimes we spend a bit of time trying to refine those questions and translate them into the language of customers. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, so if you've never been to Auckland, and if you never used the Journey Planner app, the AT Mobile app, you may not know what live departures means. Or you can get an idea what live departures is, but you won't necessarily understand that, right? So when we formulate those surveys, we try and translate it into the customer language as much as we can. And one of the reasons for us to do this is because if we go with a really fine comb through the qualitative feedback we get back, it really helps us identify what are the, not even the features. So like live departure, for example, is a big feature, right? There's a lot of stuff inside live departures. So we try to go a little bit more granular to understand which part of live departures they're using and which part of live departures may not be working for them, right? So I don't know if I'm making sense, but by tailoring those questions into the customer language, we then get that input that helps us. I don't know, I don't quite have the language, but it sort of align with what customers are telling us.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that very much aligns to that experience of being able to, you know, not to dumb things down, but to speak the customer's language so that people actually understand. particularly with experience that I've had in technology companies. We love acronyms. We love acronyms all over the place, and it's really easy to just ask a customer this particular thing, and they'll glaze over because they don't really understand it. So it sounds like some of the things that work well is just spend some time to actually ensure that customers can understand those questions, because if we just go ahead with a whole bunch of jargon, well, we're going to get a whole bunch of garbage back as well. So that's some interesting insight.
It's quite interesting. Sorry, I'll jump in for a second. It's quite interesting that you mentioned acronyms, because I remember when I was trying to think about what I'm going to say here. I remember keep thinking, oh, PT patronage. And question to the audience: does anybody actually know what PT patronage means?
I have no idea.
Just a nod will do. Right?
No idea.
Right. Okay. So this, and I caught myself doing that, and I was like, okay, I'm actually going to have to spell that out. So PT patronage means public transport patronage. And the reason I was going to bring this up, I don't know if you still ask me about this further down, but when it comes to our priorities, so remember how I mentioned the statement of intent, right? But then the org spends a bit of time translating that into more feasible priorities. And one of the priorities we personally align against is public transport patronage. So what that means in customer words is how many people use public transport, right? And that is actually one of our key alignment metric, even if you like, high level, but this is what we align against. And that makes our jobs, I wouldn't call them easy or easier, but a little bit more tangible and a little bit easier for us to translate that into specific efforts. Sorry, it's a really weird association going from acronyms to what I've just been talking about, but I thought since it happened, I thought I'd talk about it.
No, that's good. I think there's a lot of internal language in companies that we tend to get wrapped up into a bit of that echo chamber of things, and we actually forget that people don't understand. I know that when I joined the veterinary industry, we have a whole bunch of acronyms for things like DX, and that means diagnostics. Like I didn't know that's what DX meant. Or IVLS is a vet lab station. You're like, okay. And I think a lot of that comes down to actually asking those questions, like, what are you actually talking about? It sounds very exotic, but I'm sure it means something.
Coming from product, I would have said DX means digital experience, but
there we go. So I think the kind of next question I have for you is actually where I think we actually started this conversation, where I've kind of found this interest that I didn't really understand a lot of the challenges that PMs actually face in the government space, and that is your interaction with your engineering team. Now for a lot of us on this call in PM roles, we are embedded with our engineering teams. We sit next to them. We hear their chatter. We're involved in those ceremonies with them. We're embedded in that tribe. But that's not something that you experience on a daily basis. So I'd love to know, how do you interact with your engineering team?
Right. Okay. That is an interesting space. This is where we're maybe a little bit less typical. So let me just walk you through the structure a little bit, so that people on the call understand what I'm talking about. So AT has an external dev partner. So essentially, we outsource our development. There is some internal dev resource, but the product space, the AT mobile and the website, we don't tap into that. We work with an external dev, right? Now, I know it is not uncommon to have something called offshore dev teams. I know a lot of teams that work with, for example, American developers or Philippines or whatever it is, right? So in our case, it's not that. In our case, our devs, they're actually across the road. They're on the other side of Victoria Park. So physically, they're quite, geographically, they're actually really close to us, but they are external, right? That comes with a, not a disclaimer, but with a bit of a remark. They have been with AT for a very long time. So they actually, in some ways, they're really close to our skin. They know our structure. They understand how we operate. They understand some intricacies of how we operate. They understand our priorities. So from that point of view, they're not that remote. but in terms of their own structure, in terms of who runs the company, they are external, right? So there is that interesting combo of factors in this whole game, right? So did you ask me like what the challenges may have been? Is that?
Yeah, I mean it's super interesting to know that, you know, obviously you're not embedded within that team, and it's not like they're on the other side of the world. They're probably a walk away in the next office block. So I think that's, you know, that's an interesting, you know, challenge to face on a daily basis, because quite often when we're in the office and we're working with engineering teams, we walk over to them and we have a chat or a shoulder tap, or we try not to have a whole bunch of, you know, context switching for them. But it's interesting to kind of see that those challenges that you have where there's probably a little bit more of a process to get through. So I suppose that's a good kind of segue into that next question around that collaboration. So, you know, what are those tools that you're using to actually keep in touch, make sure that you're actually speaking the same language? You know, it sounds like it's a really confusing and hard thing to do. I know I had an experience where I had an engineering team in Auckland, but also in Colorado and then in Melbourne, and just working out those time zones is difficult enough. But I found communication and collaboration was super hard. Like, how do we ensure that we can execute and get our delivery teams to actually deliver? So, you know, what does collaboration look like? What are some of the tools that you're using to keep in touch with your team?
All right, yeah, thanks for that. Luckily, we don't have the time zone issue because that would have added to complexity quite a lot. So from that point of view, we're actually quite lucky. In terms of the tools and collaboration methods, if you like, well, meetings. Who doesn't like a good meeting? So we see our dev. I can't say that it's huge amount of face-to-face or online for that matter. So most of our interaction is online. There is a little bit of face-to-face, and we're starting to try and increase that a little bit just for that relationship building and just picking up those little context things, right? So we see them, we've got one big hour meeting during the week where we discuss new projects, ongoing projects. We go into a little bit of detail. We do design demos. We collect some of their feedback on the designs. So the actual work, right? Then we have a half an hour weekly status updates. So this is where we go through boards, I guess. I'll get into that in a second. And then we have a fortnightly bugs and optimization planning meeting with them. So that doesn't actually sound like a lot, but on top of it, we obviously have plenty of, we got all the Teams chats, we got, well, God forbid, emails. Sometimes emails are actually the best way to do it, but it kind of depends. We've got, some of us are hooked into their internal Slack as well. So that can be quite helpful for quick reach out. There is a formal way for us to feed stuff into them through our own ticketing system, internal incident ticketing system. Whereas we go through the formal, I'll submit a ticket for that. Please assign it to that. And then they get their ticket, so they're hooked into that. And then a bit of ad hoc meetings as well when difficulties come up, when we need to discuss something urgent or random or whatever. And then I guess what was I trying to say? I guess from that point of view, it's actually not that different. If we were like after COVID, I think everybody's somewhat hybrid to more. A lot of teams are more hybrid than less. So from that point of view, I don't think we're actually that entirely different. Yeah, I think that kind of paints the picture.
Yeah. So in terms of obviously not being co-located with your team or maybe in that same organization, are there any kind of like surprises and things that come up where, you know, maybe someone has taken, you know, some leave or they're out sick? Do you tend to, you know, find that out pretty quickly, or is it kind of after the fact?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So that does come with a bit of a challenge. So yeah, like you said, if someone is off sick or if there are any changes in the team, we don't necessarily find out about it immediately. That could be one of the challenges. If there are technical delays, I'd say we usually find out reasonably quickly about it. If they sat in the next room, in the room right next to us, we'll probably find out about it quicker because we just, I don't know, hear them throwing mugs around or something, or breaking their computer screens or whatever. Devs will do when they're upset. So
Devs
we're
will do
not,
whatever they need to, yes, for stress
yes.
relief, of course,
So
yes.
we're not exposed to that. It's probably worth mentioning the way we operate with them is, so we've got our POs and they have their POs. So our POs talk to their POs. It's got its positives and negatives as anything in life, right? So the positive is it actually takes a lot of overhead off us because their POs manage their developers. We don't really have to interact with that, and that's, to be honest, sometimes that's super helpful and takes a lot of mental load off us. But then, yeah, of course, as as soon as you get an extra step, an extra chain, part of the chain, you do that does sometimes slow things down a little bit. Not terribly. For example, if we have critical incidents, our dev partner, they've actually been really good. They've always responded very quickly, and hey, they got their own monitoring going. So from that point of view, no. But yeah, if there are some, like I said, if there are some team changes or somebody's off sick or they moved somebody to another project, we may have a bit of a delay finding out about it.
Yeah, now things like miscommunication is something that obviously all PMs find. Like sometimes it can be super hard to communicate effectively in an organization. I kind of feel like sometimes I need to say something 7 times at 7 different intervals for it to actually like sink in. But are there any kind of specific examples that you can kind of think of where maybe miscommunications or misunderstandings kind of arise from having that bit of a disconnected team, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge that everybody faces, and again, the remote communication, remote collaboration is a big thing these days. So I think everybody faces those challenges to an extent. A specific example would be, we have been working for some time on a project we internally call it timetables. But again, to put some context to it, so there is a page on the website which hosts a lot of, well, these days we call them hard copy timetables, but in reality, these are just PDF files that are sort of not exactly, but sort of replicas of paper brochures with some bus and train and ferry routes and some of the timetables in them. And we've been working on this for quite some time now because it's just a little niggly project. It's actually not little, but it's a niggly project that just keeps giving. The reason for that is we have some organizational constraints. So this PDF brochures, they are structured in a certain way that is not quite easy to translate into some sort of digital form, as in replicate their structure in the design and serve people with those. To give you a bit more context, so some of these brochures, they contain more than one route and more than one map and this kind of thing. So it makes it a bit more complicated. Right, and then we have I think we have, off the top of my head, I think we have 196 bus routes and about 6,000 bus stops in Auckland. So we're not exactly in the position to go and ask, hey, can we have an individual timetable for each one, please? And that actually wouldn't be impossible, but they change. Right, so maintain it. So
yeah.
So basically what happened is we have a task, and we've been looking at this because it's actually quite a high demand page. So we've been tasked with trying to build something for it, right? And it's been proven difficult. We've been trying to spell out the requirements. We've done a few rounds of UX, UI, but what happens is quite often we go to dev and we just get stuck in detail. So we sit in the meeting, everything is clear, everybody understands what we're talking about, what the requirements are. The minute we walk out of the meeting, it's so complex it just slips out of people's heads. So we've tried. I've personally tried. I've tried writing the PRD document. I've tried summarizing the requirements in what I thought was very clear emails, and then trying to collect some feedback on that, and they come back with something, and we just get stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck because it's complex. So nothing really was happening until POs said, okay, enough. They sat down and said, we need to really simplify the whole thing as much as potentially possible. And this is when we started getting some traction on it. So that's a very long preamble to me saying that I found that, so with the added challenge of remote collaboration, the only thing that I find that works is simplify it as much as possible, actionable bullet points as much as possible. So do the homework, translate that into something that will be easy for them to understand. So, and that's how we're kind of moving forward.
Yeah, I think we tend to forget some of the complexities, particularly with public transport. To hear that there's over 200 bus routes out there, and we've got a population of probably just less than 2 million. I did like a very quick search, and if you compare that to London, London's got like 670 bus routes, but they've got a population of like almost 9 million. So
right.
the complexity is really interesting when you look at that and what you're having to face, and obviously having then to kind of work with that. I'd say remote team, but not a team that you're embedded in. Now,
We've actually
done.
Sorry, I'll just jump in for a second. We've done
No,
a bit of and our UX designers have done a bit of. They've actually done quite extensive research on this whole timetable thing, and it is a big problem. There isn't a lot of public transport organizations out there in the world who've managed it really well, because it is a complex problem.
Yeah, it sounds like a very complex problem, but coming back to the first thing you said there, it sounds like you can get some joy and exhilaration out of actually solving that problem and making it better for people as well.
Well, the good news is I think we have a solution that's shaping up.
Ooh, all right.
So there might be some good stuff coming out.
Okay, right. You're going to keep us like in anticipation to know what that is. But look, one of the final things I'd love to ask you about, and we'd love to also get some questions from other people that are online, but I'd love to come back into that, metrics. So you mentioned the public patronage. Can you explain a little bit more about that metric? What it is, how you measure it, and how do people in your organization understand it?
So yeah, thanks for that question. And this really the question about how do we actually align, right? Because public transport patronage is a high-level metric, and it's a very simple metric. It's how many people got on bus, train, and ferry in a given day or in a given month. It's a very, very simple metric, right? For us, we don't necessarily sit there and measure, we had extra 10 people getting on the bus today. Because we internally, that's the metric we align to. The stuff we do is, it is actually a bit hard for us to align directly to that metric, right? So we release, to give you an example, let's say we improve how our how our icon stops in the app, the visuals for the stop icons in the AT mobile app, right? On how it's displayed on the map. It's really hard to link it into PT patronage, right? There isn't. It's kind of like a proxy connection, right? So this is where our POs have to do a bit of creative navigation and connected. But on our level, where I operate a lot, we don't necessarily look directly at that. We just keep it in the back of our minds, right? We operate more with stuff like, and we have an analytics person inside the team, which is mega helpful because he understands how Google Analytics works and what to click in there, because I personally do not love the interface of Google Analytics. So we've got him. So we use quite conventional stuff. We use like retention, acquisition, conversions, click-through rate, SEO score. This is our like daily lexicon, and that's what we look at. When we do A/B tests, we look again how the retention was affected. What was the drop-off rate? Where the drop-off rate happened. So this is the kind of stuff we look into. So I don't think it's actually alien to anyone on this call.
I find, yeah, I find that so fascinating when, a lot of companies that I've worked with, when they look at their success metrics, they tend to try and make them, perfect and go really deep into it. And, a lot of gold plating, it needs to be the perfect metric. And therefore, if it's perfect metric, therefore we can measure success. But I think you've hit on that key point there is, making it simple, making it easy to understand, and making it a metric that you can kind of see where it's out of a trend, or that's interesting. We dip below a certain point. That's interesting.
Well, it
I've
also
definitely
comes down
found it.
to technical capabilities, right? Because
Mm,
GA being a very versatile tool, it can only do so much. And there are
yeah,
things we do run into things. Oh, we'd be really interested to find that out, but GA can't actually do that. I can't remember an example off the top of my head, but it did happen a couple of times in my presence. So we kind of have to balance that. Well, this is what we can measure, and how do we actually translate that into insights that help us drive the whole thing?
I think some of the traps that I've found a lot of PMs kind of fall into, particularly with metrics, if they're spending a lot of time gold plating those metrics, is they tend to treat the metric as a product. You're spending a little bit more time thinking about the metric and how you track it than actually delivering that value out for your customers. So
We
yeah,
spend a
that's
bit more
interesting.
time on what does that actually tell us. We do spend a bit of time
Yeah,
on that, but I can't
yeah.
say we're spending endless hours on it.
No, because we've got other things that we need to do. We need to be delivering that customer value, right? Yeah.
I'll tell you what, from
Now,
personal experience, customer testing, when you do it either online or in person, takes a whole lot more time because it has a lot of overhead to it.
it does, particularly when you have focus groups or you're bringing people in, you kind of got to feed them and water them, and it takes a long time. But yes, even when we're doing things on Zoom and remote, it takes a while to go through all those reviews and all the insights that you get out of it as well.
But just the pure admin of it is quite an overhead.
Yeah, no, it is. There's a lot of work. So, yeah, that's fantastic. I think we've actually got some really great key takeaways here, and would love to know if there's any questions from the people in the audience. I think we've got some, some key takeaways here that I think a lot of those challenges that PMs believe are quite unique in their organization, whether it is public or private, tend to not be really unique. I think we've got a lot of common problems that we tend to face as product managers and product people. And I think a key takeaway there is to collaborate and actually share some of those experiences. There's obviously different challenges that you find in the public sector versus the private sector, but I think it's a lot of those common things around ensuring that you've got clear communication. You can actually articulate things in a very simple way for people to understand, and having things like simple metrics that people can understand, particularly your stakeholders, so you know how to actually track your success. So that's been, amazing insights into, your experience and the way that you've been working in government as well, Andrei. So I'd like to hand it off to anyone who's got any questions. Now, you don't obviously need to unmute if you're on the Zoom call, but if there's any questions in the chat, I'm sure Andrei would love to answer any of them, or myself.
Shoot it, guys. I'll do my best. I don't know if I can see the chat, but I probably can.
That's okay. I can always relay that to you. I'm sure there's some people here who've taken some takeaways and would love to dive a little bit deeper into some of the things Andrei's talked about.
Yeah, hi, Z here. I'm just doing a lunchtime walk, so sorry, no camera on. I was just
That's okay.
wondering, how do you do your recruitment for your user testing? Are you using any particular platforms, or, and you mentioned doing a lot of that yourself. Can you share a bit more about that process?
Oh yeah, thanks. That's actually a really great question, and I think it's okay if I share. I don't think there's any commercial sensitivity to it. Well, I'll do this. We use one of the customer testing recruitment platforms. I'll probably refrain from giving the name just so that it's not advertising. I'm sure you guys know roughly what I'm talking about. So there are SaaS products out there that do the customer recruitment and a bit of customer management for you. We've been using that platform. They're actually quite cost effective. We find them quite cost effective, and it does take a lot of this niggly admin off you. So to give you an example, we don't have to do, when we use the platform, when we rely on it, because we have a couple of other sources to do that, but when we use that platform, we don't have to do any advertising, for example, and that is a massive relief. And then we can use the platform to send the invites out. After we've sent the invites out, we kind of have to, it's often me. I kind of have to overtake, send the personal invites, a little bit more personal invites, some privacy agreements out, then make sure they actually show up. And if they don't show up, how do we move things around? So, but that recruitment platform does take a lot of, what you may call it, a lot of admin off me. And then it also rewards the people, so we don't have to actually deal with it. So we just pay to the platform, whereas we don't have to interact with the customers on that side of things. The platform takes care of paying them for the research. So I'd say, yeah, I'd say that's a great help. I'd say maybe 30% of admin goes away, 40% easy. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. We're just shopping around at the moment as well, so that's a good insight. Thanks, Andrei.
Well, I think we might be connected on LinkedIn. Just reach out to me and I can give you the name.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent. Well, we're building connections already. Yeah, I think something else is a key takeaway there is there's services out there that we can use. We don't have to do all these things by ourselves, and maybe a bit of research. We can use some services to make our lives a whole lot easier as well. So that was a fantastic question.
As a funny remark, sometimes looking at that platform, I do feel like, oh, I would improve that flow and I would improve that flow, but that's just a mind exercise for me sometimes.
Always a feature request for on the way, I'm sure.
I sent them a couple feature requests. I thought, well, why not help them if they want to?
Yeah, I love that, helping other people. So yeah, Vernon, you've unmuted. I'm sure you got a question.
Yeah. Hi, Andrei. Just wanted to check. You were talking about your engineering team. They outsource. That's another company that's providing that to you, is it?
That is correct. Yes, they're not. They are.
Okay. Yeah. My question then was, how I would assume that they have other customers, so you're competing with their other customers for their services. Is that a challenge for you, or do you kind of have their services on tap? They just jump when you call, so to speak. How does that work?
It's a really, really good question. I would say there is a bit of a balance in it. They do have, I believe they do have some other customers, but I also believe we are their biggest customer, AT as a whole. So we do, AT as an organization does have direct dial in, and they are on speed dial, and we do get the pretty quick responses, pretty quick reactions. So I'd say we are quite well integrated with them, especially given that they've been with us so long. So in terms of other customers, no, I wouldn't say, I don't see that being a massive challenge.
Does that mean from a I don't know how much you can talk about it, but from a commercial arrangement, you've got them on some sort of a retainer or something like that, and I'm not thinking here just about so ongoing BAU support, but I mean for you've got new features you want to add and stuff like that. Is there some sort of a relationship established? You don't have to kind of present statements of work every time you want to get them to do something, or how does that work?
Yeah, that is a reasonably well established. So it's actually a really good question, which I was meaning to talk about in my main part. So the way we prioritize work is through business case, but that's internal stuff. And then we either do a horizon or an annual business case, which goes through rounds of rigorous conversations and prioritization internally. And we're currently working, our POs are quite extensively working on making the process smoother and starting it earlier, so that the conversations can be had before we actually get to the sign-off stage. So just to make things easier for everybody. So this is how we identify the priorities of work, and then no, we don't have to compete for that after that.
Interesting. Okay, good to hear. Thank you.
No, excellent question. Thank you very much, Vernon. Would love to see if anyone else has any final questions before we wrap up. I'll take the silence as compliance, and that's okay. So what I will say is, Andrei, thank you so much for your time. I think this has been very insightful into seeing, the way that you're working, the way that particularly Auckland Transport is working, some of those challenges that you face, but also how you overcome some of those challenges. And I think for a lot of people, we can see that some of the challenges that we believe are unique are probably not unique to us. They're actually just common things that we find in product management. And it's about, communicating, collaborating in our community. So I want to thank you again for your time. It was great to have you, and thank you for the insights. I really appreciated that.
Look, thank you for the questions. It was quite good to actually do a bit of a reflection and summary in my own head. I always find those exercises really helpful. So it was good to be prompted externally to do that. Hey, combine two things together. Thanks to the audience. You guys have been great. Really appreciate the attention you've given me. And thanks for tuning in. Hope you didn't find my ramblings too boring.
I don't think anyone did, Andrei. So thank you very much. And if you are listening to this and watching this and you've enjoyed this content, we have a number of things in collab cohorts coming up. We have new cohorts starting next month. So we have our advanced product management course happening in July, but then next month we've got our product fundamentals course that I lead kicking off, as well as our product leadership cohort as well. So there's a number of things going on, particularly in the APAC region. So if you're looking to skill up and link up through into a cohort, highly recommend getting stuck into either our fundamentals course, our product leadership course, or our advanced product management cohort. And if you're based in the UK and the EU, we also have an advanced product management course kicking off next month as well. If you want to know more about this, head on over to collabcohorts.com. We're always keen to get in touch and to build out our community. So again, thank you so much, Andrei. Thank you, everyone on the call.
Sorry, John. I'll just play in your field a little bit. If because I've done your course that you facilitated, and that's how we met. I mentioned that in the beginning, right? So if anybody wants a little bit of feedback on what
I feel like we just lost Andrei as he was getting into the meat of his statement. I'm going to take it that that was going to be the most positive feedback for Collab ever, and that he highly recommends everybody go on that course here. Okay, excellent. All right, I will definitely have to check where Andrei is, but hopefully his connectivity will come back.
Review if you like, and yeah.
Right, I think we lost all the meat of your conversation, Andrei, because we've just missed out probably 15 seconds. So I know we've got 2 minutes left and there are a lot of time. Maybe we just want to summarize what you were saying before.
Oh, sorry, were we disconnected?
Yeah, complete disconnection. You did. It was a bit of a freeze face.
Right, okay, sorry about that. So what I was saying is, I'll play a little bit in your field, and if anybody wants to get insights into how the course was that I did with you, I'm quite happy to share that. I'm always keen to share some insights, and I try to do a bit of a balanced review. I say, well, this is what went really well. This is what I could potentially. I mean, it was perfect anyway.
Thank you, Andrei. Again, thank you everyone for your time. Have a good rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you in future collab cohort sessions. Have a good one. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Adam from Collab here. If you enjoyed that session and that conversation, give us a comment or a like and let us know what you think. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about Collab and how we help individuals step into and also thrive in product management at higher levels, check out collabcohorts.com and you'll see why we're a little bit different.